Hello everyone, thanks for joining today the 3 days online course on Introduction to Spaceland Policy. Today we are going to discuss about global space governance, the role of capacity building in spaceland policy by myself, Jayakumar Venkatesan, Deputy Chairman of International Academy of Space Law, Russia, a national point of contact of India at the Space Generation Advisory Council in support of United Nations Program on Space Application. Today we discuss about the global space governance. The objectives of global space governance is study to identify today's new challenges in space activities and doing the business in the space by private or the government, as well as to identify the viable new regulatory mechanisms that could provide near-term answer to identify the key actors. This means striving for the realistic and obtainable possible course of action through such as means looking to a new model of national space law such as French Operation Space Act. It is mandated to observance of 25 years of deorbit rule and examining the code of conduct and new types of standards and technical operational safety, etc. And it's time to consider how to use space to realize our potential, and also considering the transparency and confidence building measures and identifying the possible national uh, or regional sanction and it is demonstration programs and developing the new concepts related to space and protospace traffic management and proposing the agendas of interagency consultation among the national space agencies are key formations of programs such as CUPOS, working groups or long-term sustainability of space activities or UNISpace or International Astronautical Congress something, and considering the key roles of non-governmental agencies such as Secure Well Foundation and International Association of Advancement of Space Safety, the Space Council for World Economic Forum, etc. The Committee on Peaceful Use of Outer Space, they established by the General Assembly in 1959 to govern the exploration and use of space for the benefit for all humanity. It contains this scientific technical subcommittee and also legal subcommittee. Uh, the instrumentation in the creation of the 5 territories and 5 principles of outer space and important to strengthen the international legal regime of the governing the outer space. It provides a unique platform at the global level to monitor and discuss the developments in space agenda and space technology applications, support the efforts at national, regional, and global level to maximize the benefits to use of this space science, technology, and applications. The increase of coherence and also synergy in international cooperation in space activities at all levels. And increase in the coherence in the space activities that we discussed. The Montreal Declaration in 2014, the concept of global space governance, it comprehensive and inclusive of codes of conduct and confidence building measures, safety concepts, international institutions like international territories and other regulations, procedures and standards. The the At the second Manfred Lunch Conference held at Institute of Aerospace Air and Space Law at McDowell University in 2014. So I will provide you some kind of overview of the existing mechanisms of space law governance that are high level regarding to provide some analysis of current problems, issues, and possible solutions, future actions that could improve the space global governance. Uh, this includes not only the formal territory of organizations, but they also have non-governmental organizations. They assist to develop the standards, codes of conduct, and as a useful means of coordinating activities in space. The existing governance is like the 5 crore UN space territories, mostly in the formal members. This is the decision makers by the states, and the strengths are, I mean, the creator, the core principles to access to use of space and liabilities for the damage due to the space activities, registration of obligations, and return and rescue obligations. Some of those principles are considered to be customary law and binding uh, all the states and governing all the space activities. Some of the limitations is like a product of the Cold War. It's like a geopolitical power is more complex today, and there are more space actors, including non-state actors also. Therefore, it's difficult to uphold these principles. They are limited challenge, limited enforcements of mechanisms. Moon agreement has very low participation and very low impact. UN Assembly is like a formal intergovernmental activity of UN member of states. It's making the strength is universal participation, and resolutions represent the position of members and states that can be seen in the vote counts. But limitations is, you can say, like regulations are politically, not legally and binding. So United Nations Office for Outer Space Activities it's like a formal intergovernmental activities. It's like a centralized space activity within the UN through the cooperation with many of specialized agencies, discharges that responsible for UN Secretary General under the UN territories and principles on outer space, including by maintaining the register for space objects as well as other database, which are made available to the member of states as well as the private entities, conducts the capacity building activities and disseminates knowledge through the training programs, serves as executive secretaries for ICG, and the permanent secretariat of SMPHE. Limited funding but need for growth for human resource and also the complements. You can call like UN Committee of Peaceful Use of Outer Space, UN CUPOS. It's like a formal intergovernmental activity, and some of the strength is like a specific focus on peaceful use of outer space, means for global public interest in central. The 5 core space law territories were produced by the UN CUPOS, currently focusing on long-term space sustainability and also transparency and confidence building measures as well as in GNSS. Some of the limitations you can select consensus decision making, means everything is compromised, and even CUPOS has limited to availability to reach the board agreement on new space related subject are not produced or any binding legal norms, although at the same time it also the soft law development principles resolutions, the guides supplementing new laws territories. And the conference on disarmament, it's like a formal intergovernmental organizations. It's like the specific focus of disarmaments allows in the global public interest and remain a high priority links with non-space disarmament issues. Some of the limitations like consequences of decision making means that little bit progress in politically and the sensitive area. And International Civil Aviation Organization is UN member of states and has producing much binding law on air matters, has recently started the cooperation with the UNOOSA to consider the overlap between air and space safety and traffic management activities, and to what extent that is have is like a jurisdiction and also mandate to deal with the space governance as far as the commercial space, the transportation and the suborbital activities is concerned, and individual states interested to dominate lawmaking in this, and a World Health Organization and a World Meteorological Organization and also World Environmental Program. So this is like a member of states. It's like provide the recommendations and standards in terms of radiation and environmental concern. Only these space-related governance issues address that are limited to the main mandates of this organization. An international telecommunication union. It's like states of sector members, including the regional organizations of commercial entities and also academics. The successful regulated allocation of radio frequencies and the orbital slot has near universal participation. There are some limitation, has the very few enforcement mechanisms, and no stronger ones. Breaches can be noted, and but there will be no real penalties in fact. And a committee on earth observation satellites, CUOs, it's like a formal national space agencies, coordination of satellite earth observation policies, standards, and other operational aspects. Membership limited to some of the space agencies, not binding the decision. The interagency operations of advisory group, the formal intergovernmental thing. So it's like a national space policy, and space agencies. It's like provides the recommendations of interoperability for plenary on issues of coordinating space communities, policies, and technologies. Centralized and neutral has broader participation. The recommends are not binding. Actually, it's like depending on the participation of National Space Agency, which excluding the developing nations, so they do not have the active space programs. The group of environmental experts is like an informal and also intergovernmental thing. It's like individuals selected of their expertise and produce the reports of transparency and confidence building measures according to the UN General Assembly resolutions. Similar groups have also formed for the cybersecurity and non-binding norms. Depends on the states and the body to implement on them. There is no enforcement or initiative of the mechanisms. You can say like UN space is like United Nations member of states intergovernmental organization. It's like on the invitation of the governments, some industry members. They served as important for almost all stakeholders to discuss all aspects of space exploration, use of exploitation of space, the limited and also the only the indirect influence formulation of the global governance. International Astronautical Federation is like an NGO and creates the global network of private entities and involve the space activities of large scale dissemination of knowledge and technical advancements. They contribute to international cooperation, especially through annual meeting with members of parliament, and produces no applicable governance documents or guidelines still. But International Institute of Space Law is kind of NGO, brings through intergovernmental, yeah, I mean international experts and personality in capacity in their personal capacities, and rather as like a state representative to consider the issues of space law. Produces the producing proceedings and academic publications, but no general guidelines and the applicable of governance. The document no significant direct input to the global space governance. And International Association for Advancement of Space Safety is an NGO type, and individual with experts in space. They produces reports and academic publications and proceedings as well. Uh, the International Law Association Space Law Committee is like brings together international experts in their personal capacities rather than state representative to discuss the issues in the space law. And there are numerous of regulatory instruments and institutions there that are play very degree in the global space law governance and global governance. It is there are too many things have been people have been get involved in governing the space activities. There are global uh, space governance from the regional perspectives. Some of them are like European Union. There will be like territory based things. There are the different members, and there are some Asia Pacific Space Cooperation APSCO there, and also the Asia Pacific Regional Space Agency Forum APRSF is there. Uh, to discuss the issues. And here some of the national space policies and space law governance. There can be the no doubt of the strongest and most effective source of governance programs comes at level of national space policy and law. The growing number of states have established the statements is like national defense space programs and also its activities. The number of cases, such as with the French Space Operations Act, they split the provisions for enforce of international space agreements and the convention for provisions that such as the UN guidelines on space debris. This can be accomplished through such means of penalties, taxation, or maybe the legal provisions, the guidelines, or policy objectives. Most of the brief exposition of selected states' space policies, laws, and guidelines and administrative regions are summarized. Some of the things. To some extent, there will be some errors and also the summaries of information concerned by national policy and governance and regulations of the national space programs will be discussed separately. Some of the existing national policies and laws and governance is like existing governance mechanism is like national laws, regulations, standards, policies, guidelines, and regulatory bodies. It's like a completely formal at like a national level. Mainly the official law and the policymakers administrative staff and in some states and participated by the private sector, some of the countries, and it must be the strength will be the very effective in creating the implementation the national governing regimes and shaping the global space governance mechanisms often necessary to implement global space governance systems. But some of the limitations like lack of national laws in some of the states, even spacefaring states, divergent nature creates an inconsistency and possibility of extraterritorial application of some of the national laws. And national laws of certain states may impede to the adopt to the global space governance. The here some of the discussions we can think on United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs, the UNOOSA, the substantive secretariat of Committee for peaceful use of outer space. It is in a scientific and technical committee and legal subcommittee, and there will be like it coordinates with the interagency coordination with the United Nations on use of this space technology. It's like UN space, and maintains the coordination and cooperation with the space agencies and intergovernmental and non-governmental organizations involved in space related activities. The implementations, the United Nations program on space applications and implementations on United Nations platform for space-based information and disaster management and emergency response program, that is UN Spider program, and discharges the responsibilities of sustainable development goals of territories, that has been like principles of outer space and including the register of object, uh, and also it is like the space governance. It is under the some of the territories and principles and the register of objects in and thing, and the secretariat of ICG and SMPAG, the capacity building and space land policy. The CUPOS is the 92 state members of CUPOS, that they are like from the different African region and the Asia Pacific regions, European regions. There will be 92 member of states of the countries, and in CUPOS mandate, 1959, the UN General Assembly resolutions of 1472 of 615 is like a reaffirmed role on CUPOS that mandates the committee that's review the international cooperation and study the space-related activities that could undertaken under the United Nations auspice. They encourage and assist with the national space research programs, study the legal problems which rise from the exploration of outer space. The current issues of CUPO's agendas are like space and climate change and space debris, disaster management, space and water, and space law and space policy, the long-term sustainability of outer space activities, UNISpace plus 50, and space security and TCBMS and near Earth objects, global navigation satellite systems, space weather, space and global wealth. The new items of legal subcommittees agendas were being included in general exchange of views of legal aspects of space traffic management in 2016, general exchange of views on application of international law to small satellite activities, and the general exchange of views of potential legal methods of activities of exploration, exploitation, and utilization of space resources in 2017. The space law policy or consideration at the national level. The national policy and regulatory frameworks like national perspectives of space economy, space society, space accessibility, space diplomacy, national security. Mostly the integration on wide range of national activities, overarching and coordination to fulfill the obligations under the territories on which state to become a party, to achieve the consistency and predictability in conduct of space activities under the jurisdiction of the state, to provide the practical regulatory system for the non-governmental and private sector involvement, basis for the regional and national international level cooperation. Some national policies and laws and global governance, as I discussed with, it's like mainly the official law and policymakers, the administrative staffs, and also the government the participation, and some of them they will encourage the private participations. This must be in a very effective method to creating the implementing the national governance regimes and shaping the global space governance mechanisms often necessary to implement the space governance systems. Some of them are having some limitations like lack of national laws in some of the states, even in spacefaring states, nations. Divergent nature creates the inconsistency and the possibility of extraterritorial applications of some national laws, and the national laws of certain states may be impede or adapt to the global space governance some norms. International mechanism for cooperation is like a multilateral agreements and bilateral agreements, regional mechanisms like government to government frameworks agreements, and agency and memorandum of understanding and implementing arrangements, coordination mechanisms like IADC, Charter of Space and Major Disaster, ISEF and GEO, CEOs and ICG and SMPH, etc. Like regulation, regional space organizations mechanisms, ESO, ESA, and APSCO, APRSF, and AU, and ALC, and SEA, and some of them are CUPOS, UNOOSA, UN systems of entity. UNOOSA role is like United Nations for Outer Space Office role is like and discharging the Secretary Generals of Territory of Obligations, maintaining the register of objects launched into the outer space. The Convention on Registration of Object is launched into this outer space, Article 3, and dissemination of information related to outer space activities, including the discovery of harmful phenomena provided by the states, and territory on principle governing of the activities of the states in the exploration and use of outer space, including the moon and other celestial body, Article 5 and Article 11. So dissemination information related to the recovery of foreign astronauts in distress or space objects in the states within the territory of the written agreement on rescue of astronauts and return of astronauts and return the object launched into space, Article 2B. So dissemination of information related to the lunar exploration and habitation. The agreement governing the activities of the space of states on moon and other celestial bodies, Article 9. The online index of objects launched into the outer space, the web-based territory monitoring and verification tools developed by UNOOSA in 2001 and allowing the states to identify the space object has been registered, who is the state of registry. And fusion of official and unofficial data includes all registered and unregistered satellites, probes, or spacecraft or space station flight elements from 1957 to present. The functional space objects only, the space debris, non-functional objects are not included. And each space object record contains, when available, the information from the state of registry, initial registration document, Article 4, and paragraph 1, and it's like a document containing the additional information, and the document containing the date of decay, re-entry, or deorbit. Links to the documents by the other states containing the information related to the space objects. Also, it will be provided mentioning the state providing the launch services. There will be like links to the documents provided by states under the territories of the principal outer space territory rescue agreement (NPS) principles. And search could be the performed at the different parameters, name and international designator, launch site, date, and orbital. This is the website link if I have provided here. You can find the space objects here. And United Nations for Outer Space Affairs is organizing the capacity building program activities in space law and policy. The series of UN workshops on space law, it's in Netherlands in 2002, and Republic of Korea they have organized in 2003, and in Brazil in 2004, and in Nigeria 2005, and in Ukraine 2006, and in Iran in 2009, and in Thailand 2010, and Argentina they have organized in 2012, and China they have organized in 2014, and in Vienna in 2016. The new series of United Nations Conference on Space Land Policy, it is going to happen in Russian Federation. This will be the first space policy conference held in Russia and Moscow, international one, and it was under one also planned in Turkey in 2019. And the International Academy of Space Law, we organizing the capacity building activities in space land policy. They promote awareness of legal and policy aspects, drawing to the attention to authorities and decision makers to tropical uses. And some of the we promote the implementation of the legal regime of outer space and enhance the capacity building efforts like organizing online courses and like this, and organizing some webinar series. And also we have formed the committee of international expert committee. We can get involved in regulatory activities. And United Nations curriculum on space law is like first module 1 is like basic concepts of international law and space law. In module 2 is like international law and other regulations applicable to remote sensing and geographic information systems and satellite meteorology and global climate change. The module 3 is like international law and other regulations applicable to satellite communications. Model 4, we use international law and other regulations applicable to the space and atmospheric sciences. The model 5 will teach about this international law and other regulations applicable to the global navigation satellites. And new international outer space project is on space land policy for new space actors and fostering the responsible for national space activities. It will take in a 3 to 4 year project in different stages for targeted and tailored capacity building and advisory service aimed for regulatory authorities for emerging space nations. Assess of needs of the requesting the states on technical legal assistance, taking into the account of judicial and administrative and technical requirements. Raise awareness of fundamental principles on international space law and how those should be operational in space activities, and work with the space law and policy to experts around the world. And UN Space 50 is like the transforming the world of 2030 agenda of sustainable development. We work on people. It is like people, prosperity, peace, partnership, and finally the planet. There are sustainable development goals of relevance to the space industry, and also the space is like in space technologies, like we tried for the no poverty, the gender equality, and zero hunger, global health and well-being, quality education, and the clean water and sanitation, affordable and clean energy, decent work and economic growth, and reduced inequalities, and responsible for consumption and production, and life below the water, and life on land, peace and justice, and strong institutions and partnership for the goals, and climatic change, and you can say like sustainable cities and communities, the industry innovation and infrastructure, and the clean water and sanitation. It's like direct work and economic growth together. And UN space is like cross-cutting areas, thematic priorities of cross-cutting areas where the CUPOS has had major contribution. And the space governance, the UN territories and principle on space activities, and CUPOS guidelines and General Assembly resolutions of outer space, and capacity building in use of space science and technology and their applications for the benefit of all countries, resiliency, disaster risk reduction of near earth objects, and space weather. Interoperability is like including the work done by the International Committee on Global Navigation Satellite Systems and other current and new coordination mechanisms such as IAWN and SMPAG. And space for sustainable developments efforts by the committee and its member of states as well. UNOOSA, it meets the 2030 agenda of sustainable development. The 7 thematic priorities with the mechanisms agreed by the CUPOS. Number 1, global partnership in space exploration, innovation, and action team by members of states, and legal regime of outer space, and global space governance, the current and future perspectives, a legal subcommittee working groups on territory and coordinations with working groups of legal technical subcommittee, and enhanced information exchange of space objects and events, the mechanisms, and the international framework on space weather services, and international space cooperation for wealth and health, and the international cooperation of towards the low emission and resilient societies, and the capacity building for 21st century, and technical regime of outer space and global governance of current and future perspectives. The complex set of objectives identified by CUPOS in 2016, increasing the assessing the states of affairs of legal regime of outer space, identified as possible gaps and progressive development of international space law, etc. Legal subcommittee working group on status of territories in 2017 agreed to multi-year working methods of 2017, 2020, and 3 years cluster. One is like questionnaire of working groups on basis of analysis effectiveness of legal regime of outer space, addressing the status of scope and accessing the as appropriate, and addressing the possible gaps, and to enhance the promotion of exchange of space objects and the events, and the cluster of promoting the universality of 5 UN territories of space, outer space. It is like including the identifying the approaches and possible criteria for developing for guidance document, as well as the promoting the increase in membership of CUPOS and progress and outcome of the past working groups to be observed and launch state and registration practice and international mechanisms. Unispace is the progress the governance, capacity building, resilience and interoperability and space for sustainable development. This goes on thematic priorities and it goes to space economy, space society, space accessibility and space diplomacy and space 2030, and it will be taking care of the people, planet, prosperity, peace and partnership. International Academy of Space Laws are also having activities on academia and governance and R&D centers. In academia, we have an international advisory council, independent expert councils, R&D consultancy committee, and Cosmos University. We plan to offer in the future like postdoctoral department and doctoral department, MBA, EMBA, and DBA schools for in space law and governance. And in governance, International Board of Trustees, and we have the leadership and board of directors and executive board and the global compact of space administrations. We have trust funds management and R&D centers is like working on the policies making and space ecology institute, space economic institute, space diplomacy institute and space research institute and space policy institute, space technology institute and the space security institute. So International Academy of Space Law holds an roundtable conference talk with State Duma and Russian Parliament of Russian Roscosmos, the stakeholders on capacity building program and space law. It's myself, Jayakumar here, and our chairman Atim Bondranko is sitting next to me. And thank you for listening, and feel free to write us any questions regarding to space law and activities and further engagement with us. Thanks for listening, and special thanks to Nicholas Hedman, Chief of Center Chief for the policy and legal aspects of United Nations for Outer Space Affairs, and thank you very much.